Could a Lane Kiffin, Ed Orgeron reunion in Baton Rouge be in the works? I've got some thoughts on it. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well, so please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. And thank you for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. As Kiffin Watch 2025 rolls on, we do, of course, expect, per Keith Carter's statement and announcement after the Egg Bowl, about Lane Kiffin's future. Speculation continues to run about how Lane Kiffin in Baton Rouge might look. And there was a report from Matt Zenitz at CBS Sports that LSU would be open to Ed Orgeron joining Lane Kiffin's staff in Baton Rouge. Now, that was an unsourced report, an anonymously sourced report, I should say. So we don't know who associated with LSU gave that comment to Matt Zenitz. But it's rooted in the fact that a couple of days prior, I say a couple of weeks prior, Ed Orgeron was a guest on Unsportsmanlike on ESPN Radio, national morning show. And there was this exchange between Coach O and Evan Cohen, the host of that show, about a possible return to Baton Rouge. Give a listen.
Do you want to be the next LSU head coach?
Oh, I'd love to. You kidding me? Hey, I'm one phone call away. Hey, I just got to get in my truck. I'll be back. I could be there today.
If someone specifically became the head coach, would you be willing to be his assistant? And that someone is someone you've been close with and worked with, Lane Kiffin. Would you ever go back to be an assistant?
Yeah, I'd consider it. I love LSU. I still got my home in Baton Rouge. I love when I coached with Coach Miles, being the defensive line coach. I love the Tigers, and I'm getting back to coaching for sure. I consider it, no doubt.
So, Coach O said he'd be open to it. You're starting to hear Ed Orgeron's name mentioned, associated with a lot of jobs, Arkansas, Oregon State, maybe namely among them for head coaching jobs. But the reality is that's likely agent-driven, where, look, Ed Orgeron's buyout with LSU expired. The last payment to Ed Orgeron as part of his buyout with LSU is in December. So his buyout at LSU is expiring. So Coach O has been out of coaching since he last coached the Tigers in 2021. So he's taken 4 seasons off. He's, as he said, he's spent time with his kids. His boys are coaching now, and he's split his time between Florida and Louisiana. And now it's time to get back to work, and he wants to coach again. The reality is, for Ed Orgeron, it's unlikely that he'll be a head coach again. Certainly not a Power 4 head coach. Is there a scenario where an FCS team, even a Louisiana FCS team like his alma mater, Northwestern State, if that job came open, could he maybe be in line there? Sure. That would make a lot of sense. We saw a Division II schools hired Art Briles. It's going to bring a lot of attention. And you can hire a national championship winning coach at a smaller school. You bring some attention to that program, not that dissimilar from guys like Eddie George, Deshaun Jackson, Michael Vick being hired as head coaches and at FCS schools. So certainly that could be a possibility for Ed Orgeron. But if he wants to get back in coaching at the major college level, being a position coach is very likely going to be his path. Now, the interesting part about the Lane Kiffin tie, as Matt Zenitz reports, the possibility of LSU being open to Ed Orgeron coming back, it is complicating. I mean, this is an LSU football program that fired Ed Orgeron and paid him a lot of money not to coach. Now, Scott Woodward was the athletic director who fired Ed Orgeron. Joe Oliva hired him. Scott Woodward fired him. We know Scott Woodward is no longer the athletic director at LSU. It's Verge Osbury. So Verge would have to be open to that idea. And candidly, I have not personally asked Verge Osbury that question. And I don't know that anyone has asked him that on the record. Be happy to do that next time that I see Verge. Be willing to ask him that question. But it makes a lot of sense from Ed Orgeron's standpoint. Of course, he would want to come back and coach at LSU. LSU is a power program. He would stand to make as a position coach, I would assume, close to 7 figures. I mean, Kyle Williams, the current defensive line coach, is pulling in over $750,000. This is his first job. Frank Wilson, as the running backs coach and associate head coach, before he was promoted to the interim head coach, Frank was making $1 million as an assistant. So when you look at the opportunity coach at the highest level, what your salary would look like naturally. Of course, a place like LSU would be attractive to Coach O. And then there's the connectivity there with Lane Kiffin. Just a little bit of history. So both Ed Orgeron and Lane Kiffin served under Pete Carroll at Southern Cal from 2001 to 2004. So it was four seasons there together. Of course, after that, Ed Orgeron became the head coach at Ole Miss. When Ed Orgeron was fired at Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin got the Tennessee job, of course, after the Raiders thing fell apart, Lane hired Ed in 2009 to be his defensive line coach at Tennessee. After one season at Tennessee, Lane, of course, bolted to go back to Southern Cal, where he was the head coach from 2010 to 2013, brought Ed with him as his defensive line coach. Then, of course, Ed became the interim after Lane was fired. So they spent 9 seasons together, 2001 to 2004, then 2009 to 2013. 9 seasons together. Assistants under Carroll, and then Ed as an assistant under Kiffin from 2009 to 2013. So there's a long history there of the two working together. The question from an LSU perspective is, do you want to replace Kyle Williams? If so, is Ed Orgeron the right choice? And what is the most complicating factor therein? I want to give you my opinion after laying that groundwork, and I'll do that as we continue here. Locked on LSU, it's your team every day. The holiday season is right around the corner, and that means it's time to get your home ready. Whether you need more seating for guests, cozy new linens, or fun serveware for holiday hosting, Wayfair's Black Friday sale is here to help you make your space shine. And the best part, you don't have to wait. Wayfair's Black Friday deals are happening all month long with up to 70% off from sofas to spatulas. Couldn't believe how fast everything shipped, by the way, just in time for the holidays. So don't miss out on every Black Friday deal. Head to wayfair.com now to shop Wayfair's Black Friday sale for up to 70% off. That's WAYFAIR.com. Sale ends December the 7th. And we're brought to you by Game Time. College football is back. Couldn't be more excited. Tailgates, rivalries, energy in the stands. There's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. Pulled up Game Time, just a couple of taps, you'll see amazing deals. Your favorite college football games as low as $25, and the app makes it super simple. You can even see the exact view from your seat before you buy your tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. You know, the most complicating factor of potentially Ed Orgeron coming back to LSU would be personality and hurt feelings. When you just look, by the way, I'm going to compare Ed Orgeron's situation to a former U.S. president. I'll make it make sense in just a second. If you're a history buff, you'll know where I'm going. But if not, you'll appreciate this. There's a lot of people when, and just very candidly, I know there's a lot of people who are finding this show for the first time throughout all of the Lane Kiffin saga, and many people who may not be familiar with my work, and that's okay. Welcome. Appreciate it. Of course, appreciate the everydayers. When Ed Orgeron was the head coach at LSU, it would be fair to say that maybe he and I had a dicey relationship. And I want to be clear, there's nothing personal. I have nothing at all personal against Ed Orgeron at all, whatsoever. When he was hired in 2016, I did not like the hire and said so on air. I think I don't want to speak for Coach O, but it's pretty clear to me that he wasn't super excited about my opinion, and I'm not sure that ever went away. I don't need to go any deeper into that, but over the course of Ed Orgeron's tenure as LSU's head coach, there were a lot of people, audience, fans, listeners of my show, consumers of my content, that assumed that I didn't like Ed Orgeron, that we had beef. There's nothing further from the truth. Sincerely, I have nothing at all, whatever personal about Ed Orgeron. It was just when LSU fired Les Miles, they fired a championship-winning coach, paid a giant buyout to promote the interim to promote the defensive line coach from a failed staff that had only been a failed head coach during his time at Ole Miss. I didn't like the hire. That was it. And we could debate Ed Orgeron's tenure. He led the greatest season ever, and I would absolutely accept all the bad for that amazing season still. But all that to say, I think for some, when they hear the idea of Ed Orgeron coming back potentially as defensive line coach, they would look to me and say, well, Moscona's going to hate that. And actually, I don't. I love the idea of Ed Orgeron coming back to LSU as the defensive line coach and recruiting coordinator, potentially. Now, Frank Wilson's still on staff. And if Lane Kiffin, remember, Frank Wilson was also on Lane Kiffin's Tennessee staff in 2009. So I would assume that if Lane Kiffin is in fact hired at LSU, he would retain Frank Wilson. And you would create an incredible staff. You have Frank and Ed on the same staff. My goodness. Corey Raymond, if he were retained, which he should be. But anyway, I don't want to get too far down a path. All that to say, Ed Orgeron is an exceptional recruiter. I would argue, have argued in the past, that's his superpower. And he is also one of the great defensive line coaches, tactically and technically, ever. He's on the Pete Jenkins tree, and he's awesome. Ed Orgeron is awesome at those things. He is an awesome recruiter and awesome defensive line coach. If you could have Ed Orgeron on staff at LSU, yes, absolutely, 100% co-sign, absolutely on board with it. If that's someone who Kiffin would want on his staff, I would have no problem, which I would celebrate that. And clearly he loves LSU despite being fired. I mean, that's part of the business and the gig. And I told you I'd compare Ed Orgeron to a former president. And that president is John Quincy Adams. And if you're a history buff, you will know what makes John Quincy Adams unique. And people misuse unique. Unique and rare are different. Unique means only one. Something that is unique means only one. And John Quincy Adams is unique because he is the only president in U.S. history who, when his presidential term ended, he went back and served in Congress. So he was a former president who then went and served in Congress for 17 years after his presidency until the time of his death. Like, imagine the current president, if President Trump's term ends and then he went and got elected to Congress, or President Obama, if he were to run for a congressional seat. Like, he was a senator before he became the president. Or if President George W. Bush decided at this point in his life he wanted to go run for Congress. Like, it sounds so foreign, like, why would anyone do that? But it's only happened once in our history. It was John Quincy Adams. To a degree, you have to be willing to humble yourself, having held the highest office, to then say, what I want to do is serve my country, and then go serve in Congress because you feel like that's a way that you can give back and serve your country. But it takes humility. And I would say the same thing would be necessary for Ed Orgeron. Like, he has walked into football ops as the guy who ran that building. He has walked up, he's gone up that elevator to the big corner office with the balcony, and that's been his office. Is he okay walking into that building, not taking the elevator to the second floor corner office with the balcony that overlooks the practice field? That was his for those seasons in Baton Rouge from 2017 to 2021, for those 5 seasons. If he is, and he's willing to be a subordinate, if he's willing to be an assistant, if he's willing to be the awesome defensive line coach and help in recruiting, that he was under Les Miles, that he was under Lane Kiffin at Tennessee and Southern Cal, that he was under Pete Carroll at Southern Cal and so many other places, then that's a no-brainer, because you have someone who is elite at those two things, and I would assume would be recharged and energized to get back on the field. And if that would help Lane Kiffin's transition, then absolutely. Now, that would certainly be disappointing for Kyle Williams, who has spent just 1 season in Baton Rouge as the LSU defensive line coach and then would be out after 1 season. But that's also just a very rude but realistic entree into major college coaching. This happens. The coaches move, they move their families, they take jobs, and then coaches get fired and they move. And it's the unfortunate part of this business that a lot of people don't often talk about, but is the reality of the human part of this. But if you told me I could have Kyle Williams or Ed Orgeron, and this is not a knock on Kyle Williams, I think Kyle could be an excellent defensive line coach. And I think this year he did a really good job with that defensive line. But Ed Orgeron has a different level of experience, not only as a coach, defensive line coach, recruiting, and at LSU, that I think it's an objective truth that you have a more accomplished defensive line coach in Ed Orgeron than Kyle Williams. Again, it's not a knock on Kyle. If Ed doesn't end up being the defensive line hire and they retain Kyle Williams, I would absolutely celebrate that. I think that would be fantastic. Loves LSU. Has been where every one of those defensive linemen want to be, which is in the NFL, played 13 years, so much knowledge he could pass along, of course, especially as college football looks more like the NFL. Yes. I mean, Kyle would be great. And it's not ultimately my decision to make. But if Lane Kiffin does become the LSU coach and he wants to rehire or hire Ed Orgeron as his defensive line coach, I would celebrate that. And I think everyone should unanimously celebrate that as well. We are just days away from getting that answer. And when we do, we'll be talking about it right here on Locked on LSU. Hey, let me know your thoughts. Would you want to see Coach O come back to LSU as the defensive line coach? You can drop them in the comments below. And thanks so much for making us your first listen. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day. For Locked on LSU, it's your team every day.